Alright drafters, we've got a really interesting draft format coming up with Commander Legends, Dungeons and Dragons, Battle for Baldur's Gate, and on top of having possibly the longest set name that we've had to date, it is going to be a Commander draft, as it kind of says in the name, and there's a few intricacies in this. I played a little bit of the last one. A lot of people might not have because of it coming out around COVID and not necessarily drafting it, but it's looking like it's got some really cool cards in, and it's an interesting draft with some things I'm not a big fan of, but generally, I think it's a really good one, and it's worth going through talking about how everything works. This video is going to be talking about how to draft it, the kind of mechanics behind the draft, and it's not a huge video on strategy. I will be coming out with a video on the archetype guide and kind of key cards and archetypes and all that stuff once we get the full spoiler in a week or two. But this is just kind of talking about how the drafts work and how you can go about drafting it. So if you want to watch that one as well, probably should subscribe, and then you'll be able to get a notification when it comes up and it's available. Anyway, let's talk about how to draft it. So the first and most obvious thing is it's a commander draft. So what it's doing, it's combining commander playability with draft. So you're drafting and you're going to play some commander games. Ideally, you'll be drafting in a pod of 8, and then you'll split off into 2 pods of 4 to play. And then after that, after you've done one game each, you'll mix the pods up and you'll have 2 slightly different pods of 4. And you'll just do a few rounds like that. So that's kind of how the idea works. You can draft with more or less players. You know, you can go down to 6, you can go up to 11 with a normal draft, and it's just going to change the pod sizes around it. So you're going to be playing in these pods, you should be playing against people who you draft against as well. So that's kind of how the idea works. You'll be building a 60 card deck, and there's some reasons for this. It's kind of the balance between the 40 card limited deck and the 100 card commander deck. And I'll be going into a little bit more detail on all these points in just a moment. And also, it's worth saying that the packs are a little bit unique. I'll do a full rundown on how the packs are collated in a moment, but there's definitely some differences between a normal draft and the draft here. As far as deck construction goes, as we've already said, you're building a 60 card deck, and there's a few reasons for this. First of all, if you're doing a normal commander deck where you would be looking for 100 cards, the draft itself would be really, really unwieldy and it'd be difficult to do. So that's why they've went for a smaller number. So it's kind of between the 40 and 100, obviously not right in the middle, but it is between those two numbers. And also 60 cards is a number which we already build decks for. A lot of us already build decks for in the constructed formats. Your standard, your modern, your pioneer, all these things use 60 card decks. So we kind of know what they should look like, the land counts they should be looking for, and all this stuff. So it makes a lot of sense to go for a 60 card deck. It's a little bit more than your normal 40, so it feels a little bit more like Commander. And to be honest, you're not going to be playing the same deck over and over and over again, so you don't need that kind of 100 card pile, which gives you the variance that you have in a normal Commander match. There's also no singleton rule, and this is because weird things can happen in drafting. There can be a lot of a certain card getting passed around, and you don't want the situation to be where you can't play a card that's you could draft because you've already got one in your deck, and you know they can lead to some issues with your deck building. So it just helps make things nice and cohesive. They did add extra commons into the set, so there's a lot of commons in the set, and that's got its own bits and pieces going on with it. It does affect the gameplay a little bit, but because there's more commons, you do have a bit more variety. So it's not going to be as kind of you're going to have 3 or 4 commons of the same type, but it's just kind of avoiding complications with that. You are building a commander deck. You're going to have a commander, potentially 2 cards in the command zone. I'll talk about that in a moment. And you're going to have to build to the commander's color identity, which means that you're going to have to build within some color restrictions, which is something I'm not a big fan of, to be honest, because sometimes at pack 3, you'll open this really cool off-color card, and in normal draft, you would definitely be splashing, but you can't do that here. I think it's a downside to the format, but I think it is a necessary part of the format. It's not commander if you're not going to the color identity, and it's just a feature that's there. And I'm not a big fan of it. I think it does lead to a couple of feel-bad moments. It's not a big deal, but I think it is a slight negative, but I definitely see why they do it. I agree with them put this in. And the last little thing on deck construction, you have a recommendation of going for 25 lands in your deck. This will change depending on what deck you got. You know, normal things that make you go up or down. If you're a bit more control, you might want a few more lands. If you've got ramp and mana rocks, and there are quite a few mana rocks in the format, then you might want to go down on this a little bit. I think the usual ratio is for every 2 mana rocks you have in you, take a land out. That's kind of the rule of thumb that you play to. So, you know, this is just a guide. Normally with a 60 card deck, it'll be looking to start at 24, but with it being a slightly more underpowered deck, for like compared to your normal constructed decks, these decks will be a little bit weaker, so they're going to be a little bit slower. So having that extra land does really help out. You're kind of getting the more expensive cards out. This is a commander draft, so it does make sense to have commanders in your deck. So there's a couple of things going on for a start. First of all, you're going to have to draft to the colour identity of your commander. So you can see here, you've got a Simic commander, blue and green, and that means you can only have blue and green cards in the rest of your deck. So the commander will take up one slot, you're going to have 59 other cards, and those 59 other cards will have to match your commander's colour identity. So here you have a blue-green card. So this is something that matters. And it also matters, it's not just the colour of the card if you're not aware, it's the colour identity, which is slightly different. So you can see here I've got Fire Diamond on the screen. It's a colourless card, it's got no colour, but because it creates red mana and it's got the red mana symbol in the rules text, mana text doesn't matter, but because it's got the red mana symbol in the rules text, this is a red card as far as commander colour identity is concerned. So you wouldn't be able to play this in this deck, even though you might want the mana rock to kind of ramp some stuff out, you wouldn't be able to play this card in the Simic deck. There is a bit of a new thing going on. It's reminiscent of Partner, which we had in the last Commander Legends, and this is backgrounds. So I think all of the monocoloured legendary creatures in the set have this choose a background. And what this means is you have your cards. So here we've got Volo, and then you've also got this green card. So Volo's blue. You've got this green card, Raised by Giants, which is his background. And you can put both of these in your command zone, and this means you can build a blue and green deck with these two cards. And the background's always an enchantment. I think it's always something which just affects the commander. So it's like the background to that character's story in your kind of world that you're building with your command deck. And it's a good way to kind of get around the problems with making sure you're drafting your commander, because you do need to draft a commander. There's a couple of ways you don't actually technically need to in a second, but you do actually need to draft a commander, and this means it gives you a bit more flexibility, because early on, if you pick up one creature, one legendary creature, which has choose a background, and then you can pick up your background later on, you can pick up a couple of backgrounds. So you could pick up a black background instead, and you can build a blue-black deck, depending on what comes around. And it does allow for a little bit of a pivot, because it means you're not like kind of pivoting right the way away from Volo, because you can still use Volo, and you can have a pivot to a black background if you want, and you can kind of build around that. It's still going to be tough to pivot and to change your colours part way through the draft, but I think it does give it more opportunities, and it just makes it kind of cool. These backgrounds can also go in the main deck, so you can just have them as an enchantment in your main deck if you want, if you've got a particularly powerful one, and you can want to choose between two different backgrounds, so you can put them in, just like you can put a legendary creature in your deck. I think the thing that's worth pointing out here is the backgrounds aren't like eminence effects, so you do need to cast them to have their effect. They don't just have the effect in the command zones, and they'll have their own command attacks applied to them. So you can cast Volo 3 times, you'd be up to a 6 mana command attacks on him, but then that command attacks wouldn't necessarily be on the Cultists of the Absolute background, because that would be separate command attacks, and vice versa as well. There is a way that the wizards have put in to kind of work with this commander to make you not have to worry too much about drafting the right colours in your commander. So if you've drafted a load of good red-green cards, but you just don't have that red or green commander background, then before we've had the Prismatic Piper, that was in the original one, but now we've got this Faceless, whatever, I can't remember what the name of the card is, but you've got this Faceless card, and this could be either your commander, this could be a legendary creature commander, or it could be a background. As a background, it won't do very much at all. It's a pretty bad commander as well, but it just means that you can use it as your second colour commander or background. It only works as a background if your commander has choose a background on it, but it is a way that kind of evens this out. Another point is you don't need to draft this card. It's a bit like a basic land. LGS probably won't have a stock of these to go, but you can just put it in without needing to draft it. So that's a really important point as well if you're going to use it. Finally, there are some 3-colour commanders in the set, and I think these are going to be really good. I know that when I've drafted in the past, one particular time I was drafting the red-green deck, I think I had red-green partners. And then pack 2, I opened a Teamer, so red, green, and blue legendary creature. And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to play that instead, because I can put the other 2 in the deck. They weren't like particularly spicy cards. I could put them in the deck, and then I could start drafting some blue cards as well. So I think the 3-colour commanders are going to be... I would pick them up as soon as I saw them, to be honest, because having access to 3 colours of good cards rather than just 2 is going to be a really big boon, I think, and I think it's a good way to go. The last bit of the mechanics I want to talk about is the pack structure. So usually with a draft pack, you'd have 15 cards. Here we're going to have 20 cards plus a token. So that's going to be consistent of 1 legendary creature or planeswalker, and it's a rare or mythic in 31% of boosters. So just under a third of boosters will have this extra rare or mythic in the legendary slot. And I think all the planeswalkers do have that they can be your commander in the set. So that's something to bear in mind as well. You get a legendary background, so rare in 1 of 12 boosters. So that's roughly 8% of boosters are going to have a legendary background. You get a non-legendary rare or mythic. So this is your guaranteed rare or mythic in the set, in the pack. And then later on you do get a foil, which can be any rarity. So you do have a potential of 4 rares or mythics in a card, which is pretty cool. It's going to happen very, very rarely. But, you know, it's not going to be uncommon to get 2 rares in a pack. It's worth pointing out here as well that when you draft, and you're going to be taking 2 cards per pack. So during the draft, you have to take 2 cards out of every single pack. And those of us who are used to normal drafts, and I know this from when I did drafts with my friends, we all sat down, right, remember, 2 cards per pack. We need to draft 2 cards per pack. And there were still mistakes happening. So if you're in a draft, just make sure you count the cards as you're drafting, when you're getting past them from the person to your right or your left. And make sure that you've got an even number in there, because otherwise the person might have just taken 1 card by accident. It happens probably more than you'll expect it to, and it's a really, really easy mistake to make. Anyway, there's also going to be 3 uncommons and then 13 commons. And, you know, 13 commons compared to the normal 10 with only 3 uncommons. I would have preferred to see maybe 4 or 5 uncommons with a couple of fewer commons, because I found that having loads of commons, it just led to these weird board stalls. So I think that was a bit of a weakness of the previous set. We'll have to see how it works out here. But it does mean that you're going to have a lot of commons in the set, because often that extra traditional foil card of any rarity is going to be a common as well. So most packs are going to have 14 commons in them, and that's quite a lot out of your 20 card pack. And then finally, you do get your token on your ad card. You do get a dungeon card. There's one particular dungeon in this. I'm not going to go too much into the rules and stuff, but there are dungeons in this set as well, just like there was before, and there's one different dungeon than we've had before. And I hope you've enjoyed that. So if you have enjoyed it, obviously, like and subscribe. Doing the YouTube stuff is really appreciated. I will be bringing out a few more videos on the set because I think it looks really cool. You can follow along on Twitter at @PLD_MTG. And as a little bonus, here is a code for I think it's 6 packs of Streets of New Capenna Arena. So feel free to stick that in. If you do manage to get the packs off it, make sure you comment below. Let me know that you've used it up, and people don't need to kind of go away and type it in and pause the video and figure out how to do it. That would be really, really appreciated. And, you know, just thanks again for watching, and catch you again around later.